We're going to kick this show off fast and furious with what I consider my good friend, the friendly face I see at construction sites all the time. His name is Marc Fabris. He's from Baxt Ingui Architects. He's one of the principal at Baxt Ingui Architects. He is a certified passive house designer. He's been with Baxt Ingui since 2010. He's worked on multiple passive house projects and has helped develop the firm's details over the years and is starting a new role overseeing construction and detailing in the firms. It's always great to see Marc on site and running a project, and we're working together on this project of the Brooklyn Heights Passive House project. So the floor is yours, Marc.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Just want to give a quick intro to our project team. As Kevin said, I'm working with Kevin Brennan, and he's doing all the air sealing and insulation and more. We got John Mitchell as our passive house consultant on the project. Michael Ingui and myself are the architects, and the contractor is Tefera Fine Building. So first thing, I just want to give a brief introduction to the project itself. It's basically an existing two-story carriage house in Brooklyn Heights Historic District. The renovation included restoration to the front facade, removal and modification of existing rear addition, excavation to create a new cellar that wasn't previously there. I think I may have said this, a small roof addition. And the other sort of interesting part of this is because it is in a historic district, we are obligated to keep things sort of minimally visible and historically accurate. As always at Baxt Ingui, we always employ this sort of systematic approach. This slide sort of dives into that systematic approach that we like to employ. And we've been sort of finessing ever since we've started working on passive house projects over the past 10 or 12 years. Just some historic sort of existing conditions and historic photos. As you could see in this slide, in this photo here, there was quite a bit of work done to the existing, the historic front facade. And this was sort of what it looked like before we got there. And also the rear facade had many lives, an existing rear addition that we wound up removing, and some more sort of site context here. So some front elevations. This is our building here. The building next to it, we worked on about 12 or 15 years ago. Was not a passive house project, but we sort of worked on this with the same contractor that we're working on currently. And it is, so, sort of tackling a lot of buildings on the same block. Just some more sort of front elevations showing what the front facade previously looked like when we got there, and then some of the modifications we made, widening an existing arched window and sort of bringing some of the garage and so forth higher to match the existing front door. And some more rear elevations. I mentioned there was a rear addition. You can't really see it in this elevation, but we sort of removed that addition because it was like a full depth building, and just to give a small rear yard to this building. We also were able to use some of the square footage that we removed to add our roof addition. And this is actually a side elevation, so it's this building's a little different than most of our buildings that we're used to working on, these row houses where we have true party walls. In this case, we have some more exposure on the side facade, and it just makes some of that detailing of the passive house stuff a little trickier. The cellar floor plan, basically mostly recreational area, some a small powder room, and then some mechanical space, which we opted to leave outside of our envelope. So the red line sort of shows how the this sort of envelope of our house. I think one of the things which Kevin could probably talk to a little bit more is that the geometries of our envelope on this particular project are a little bit complicated. You'll see this on a future slide, but that just made some of the detailing kind of tricky. We also have some photos of this vapor barrier under the slab, and then this is a photo of sort of what that looks like today, and just some more details in terms of vapor barrier coming all the way up to grade, making those connections, just really crucial to the passive house air sealing. Some more, so then up to the first floor, we have a mostly, living space, kitchen, dining, living room, garage outside of our envelope, and a small foyer also outside of our envelope, a rendering of what our kitchen will look like and sort of the state of the project today. And up to the second floor, we have basically, bedrooms, bathrooms, and laundry room, quick rendering, and then again, the stair detail of what the project looks like currently. You can see the Intello on the front wall, and then we use this peel and stick on the sidewalls, which we'll get to that as well. And then just some views of the roof addition, and again, the Intello at the roof. We have a Lamelux skylight up there, and that's pretty much it. So this is basically a diagram. You can see we sort of had to cut out the garage out of the envelope and the front mechanical space, just sort of showing the complexity of that, and just how that sort of makes some of the detailing of the connections between the insulation and the air barrier a little bit complicated. And as always, a lot of details on this project. I'll run through a few of them. In this case, we had our first floor sort of kitchen area that was within the envelope. We have our garage over here outside the envelope, and then our cellar below, partially also within the envelope. So just making all the connections, both insulation and sort of air barrier, again, just super critical to pay attention to those in the detailing phase, because that's what makes for a successful project. And then another detail at our roof, because we have a historic rear facade. Typically, we can't, raise the cornice, but we had sort of low ceilings, so we sort of employ this detail where we could raise the roof a little bit, slope it, get our outboard insulation. We got our blown-in mineral fiber, blown-in dense back, and just again some more connection details. And then this was a mock-up that Kevin did on site for us. We were sort of on the fence, do we go with the liquid applied or the peel and stick? Ultimately, I think we decided that, we did decide that the peel and stick would work better, a little bit less labor intensive, a little bit more on the material side. But because we had these rubble walls that weren't in great shape, I think everyone felt safer going with a peel and stick product and taping the seams versus the liquid applied. Some more joist pocketing details, just how important the sequence is. You get the liquid applied in the pocket, you put the steel in place, then you sort of put your peel and stick in between, and then you could put in your joists. And then in this case, we also kept a lot of the existing joists, so it was just cleaning up around the edges of the joist, getting the peel and stick in place before the subfloor goes in, taping, and then putting the subfloor in, so we have something to make the connection through the floors. Another sort of typical detail. And another detail where we had steel pocketing into a exterior wall, and we needed a little bit of a structural thermal break. We used structural foam, and then this sort of got packed in with some more foam, non-structural at the end, and then bricked in around it. Zola windows being installed. We're working with John Mocus, just sort of showing how those got delivered to the site. and some of the more unique, deep, sort of historic front facade windows that Zola was able to make for us a match. And then Kevin and John worked together, I think, on the window install and air sealing around the windows. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Nice job, buddy.
Thank you.
We're going to hold the questions until the end, right, guys? All right. So who's up next? Thank you, Marc.
Yeah, thank you, Marc. That was fantastic. I really loved the combination of the drawings and the renderings and the mock-ups and the on-site photos. Really cool. I took a lot of screenshots, so thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
I have the pleasure to talk about our next presenter, who is a doer of many things: architect, designer, artist, printmaker, writer, entrepreneur, ideas person. He was born in Melbourne, Australia, and he's made New York City his home for the past 13 years. And he's worked across 3 continents for over 23 years in the building and construction industries. His experience traverses scales and sectors, including residential, commercial, civic, institutional, hospitality, retail, and mixed use. So please join me in a resounding welcome to Ben Albury, founder of Amalgam Studios in New York City.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm going to try to get this slideshow happening. Hopefully this is working. So a couple of disclaimers. I am an architect, first and foremost. I'm not an expert in passive houses at all. This was my first passive house, my first investigation into the passive house world, and I needed some help on this project. It is a new build. It's a 4-bedroom, single-family residence 2 hours north of New York City. And I worked with 475 out of Brooklyn to help with the passive house side of things, and also Kramer Silkworth from Bowcraft, who's based in the Hudson Valley. And this location is quite close to the Hudson River. It's actually on a different river called the Rolla Jansen Kill, and it's go back a little bit. And the site is on 120 acres. There was nothing there. There was no power, no water, no nothing. I really wanted to do an all-electric home, and that's what this is. But it's not off-grid. It is connected to the main country road there. Incredible property. It has woodlands, creeks, mountains, river, and there was this open field that really spoke to me, and I sort of convinced the client to put a barn-like house in this location. We did some research into historic barns, Dutch barns, English barns, and we're very much influenced by the shape, materiality, and simplicity of the kind of the vernacular barn archetypes of the area, really, over time. And so this is a very early on sketch, which didn't sort of change too much from this overall very simple gable shape, looking north towards the views, but also looking south for the solar axis. So I really wanted something that was both passive solar, but also passive house. So use of sunlight, use of very carefully defined views with glazing, use of sun shading devices as well on the south, which sort of double up as hurricane shutters as well. So this house is wasn't designed to be full-time home, but it became one during the pandemic. So I'm proud to say that it seems to be working well for the family at the moment. So I didn't quite understand that this was more of a technical presentation. So I was concentrating on more of the design side of things. So we sort of started with very basic, forms, very simple linear form. Glenn Murcutt is a bit of a icon for me. So I wanted to sort of have a bit of an Australian vibe. The client was Australian as well, but we wanted to do something that was quite sort of European, but also quite relatively sophisticated in terms of the envelope. And I sort of convinced him to do a high performance envelope, and that's where sort of the Passive House came in. Another disclaimer: this isn't Passive House certified, but we did design it to Passive House standards every step of the way. But at the end of the day, the client wasn't interested in getting this certified, which is a bit of a shame, but just one of those things. So this is the basement, which is basically semi-submerged in the surrounding landscape. We have 2 decks, a large full-length south-facing deck. So inside, outside, permeability was really important, and access for exterior entertainment and interior large spaces, cathedral spaces, which you'll see later on. And then a north-facing deck with these beautiful views down towards the river and the hills and mountains beyond. So really quite a spectacular location and site. So I wanted to keep it quite simple. That gable shape really sort of talked, well, I felt like it was a good shape for Passive House, but I learned a lot on this process, a lot of challenges, and a lot of sort of solutions that had to be resolved. So a 3-level house, basement, ground level, and then a loft level, which was more of a open space. I'll pause on the sections here. So again, very sort of basic cross-sectional shape, but some of the cathedral ceilings feel very different as you sort of move through the house. The access is different. The corridors are different. The ceiling materiality changes as well. The staircase breaks up the house into sort of 2 public versus private zones. The staircase also has a triple glazed Passive House certified skylight. The full length of these gable forms. I think it's the longest Passive House certified triple glazed skylight in North America. Don't know, but it's about 25 feet long. We had to get special crane in to put these skylights in place. So super important sections. And this is it was designed with SIP construction in mind. Very simple frame. And I'll pause on this thing. We're sort of talking technical. A bent frame, sort of, I would call it a portal frame. The bent frame at 8 feet centers across the entire length of this linear house, supporting structurally insulated panels on the exterior walls, as well as the roof. So we've got R60 for the roof build-up, and then about R44 for the walls. And 475 helped very much with the air seal detail, the membranes that we were using. And one unusual feature with this house is that there's a rain screen, not only on the walls, but on the roof as well. And we went through a very long process of choosing what type of wood would go on the outside. So not only is this a Passive House, but most of the materials you'll see here are natural materials, and what we went with on the outside of the house was a material called Keveting, which is from Norway, which I hadn't used before, but it's a soft wood that's been processed in a way to make it behave and perform like a hardwood. So that was important to sort of keep this sort of clean, modern lines of the exterior of this house. So a few construction photos. That's showing the bentwood frame go up, and I'll pause on the last image of this because it kind of blew my mind. It was very similar to the way barns were raised in this area, for hundreds and hundreds of years. The entire frame went up in about 4 hours in one morning. So it's kind of thrilling to sort of see this, the entire framework go up, much like a barn would have done back in the day, with the whole village sort of helping out with hoisting up and pulling up all of these frames, which have been prefabricated, pre-finished, brought to site, and then just lifted into place, hoisted into place from the horizontal to the vertical. So it was quite a thrill to sort of see this go up so quickly. And then also, which was kind of thrilling, was to sort of see the SIPs go up so quickly as well. So this is Ford panel, helped out with sort of creating a passive house level SIP panels. Everything's 3Ds, all numbered. It's like a 3D jigsaw puzzle, pre-cut, pre-detailed. Everything's 3D computer cut to like 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch, and it was amazing to sort of see their crew come in and put this into place within 4 days. I think all of the wall and roof panel went up with their own crane. So really kind of eye-opening to sort of see the power of prefabrication on a very sort of high-end, high-performance home. I'll just sort of go back a little bit. So you'll see here the openings for all the windows. You can sort of see the opening for the skylight. The end walls were also SIP, but treated a little bit differently. So yeah, you can sort of see here with the basement though, that's different, not SIP. That's all sort of concrete clad in stone. And then with the interior space completely open, completely free, but the loft floor coming in at a later date, which is separate from these bentwood frames, which are Douglas fir, charred and stained. It's that sort of Sugi barn effect. Really beautiful, heavily influenced by Glenn Murcutt as well as some Japanese, minimalist, Zen-like design, as well as sort of Northern European, Scandinavian design as well. So really fantastic space, really huge height, really generous, pretty beautiful. If I say so myself, beautiful space to be in when you're surrounded by nature. You can't see any other homes. It's all just woodlands and sort of rural rolling hills. That's the end of the construction phase, I believe, of the photography. Oh, one more. So this as well. This took a bit of work. So all these windows are from a firm in Austria called Bowizo that 475 sort of recommended. I'd never worked with these guys before. All triple glazed sliding patio doors, 8 foot by 8 foot, lift and slide, tilt and turn European style windows for the bedrooms. Bowizo even did these German design, German engineered gas piston sun shading devices that lift up by hand, which creates hurricane shutters during winter, but also this veranda-like experience when they're all open across the length of the south-facing inside of this house. So that took a bit of work and a bit of detailing and engineering to get them right, to make them sort of align across this entire house. And then they also did the garage doors of the carriage house. So there was sort of two parts of this house: the main house, which you see here, which I'll sort of pause on, and a carriage house, which is not passive house. So I'm not going to talk about that too much here, but this is sort of the cheat photo where you can sort of see what we did with this is actually metal deck roof, just a simple standing seam metal deck roof underneath the sort of decking, which happens to be on an angle, which happens to be on a roof. It takes snow load. It's actually sort of one of the reasons why I sort of convinced the client to do this is that it doesn't shed the snow very well during winter, so that snow buildup can add insulative value to during winter to keep the heat in the house. So I don't really know how much that's true, but I'll defer to Bowcraft on that and the calculations that were done on how insulative all of that sort of worked out to be. So yeah, these cross horizontal cabinet were just basically screwed to these 2x4 slats, which were then clipped to the standing seam. So it's a pretty simple detail, but I wasn't aware that it had been done before. Maybe up in Canada, I think there was one, maybe in Kentucky as well. I think there was one other version. This is, and I forgot to mention, this is, I started this in 2016 and it was finished towards the end of 2018.
Oh, fantastic, Ben. It's simple and it's beautiful. We're going to ask you to pause the presentation right there so we get everybody in the first hour, but we will certainly come back and revisit this because we have a lot of questions for you that came into the chat while you were presenting.
Okay.
So hold that thought. And with that, I'm going to give it to Sean to introduce our next presenter.
Perfect. Thanks, Shannon. So we got Alfred from Euroline. He's a lifelong entrepreneur in the construction industry with a wide range of experience in all facets of the building business. He is a certified Passive House consultant, as well as in sales of high quality construction products at Euroline Windows. Can you keep it short, Alfred, so you can jump into things? Give us the presentation. Over to you, bud.
Thanks, Sean. And thanks, Ben, for sharing that beautiful house. Man, that is gorgeous. So just quickly, a couple seconds here about Euroline Windows. You see our logo as a sponsor, just to give you some background information about the company. We're a high performance custom window supplier here in Vancouver since 1993. We make tilt and turn windows. That's what really put us on the map. We've been making Passive House products since 2016. We use Rao Fipro for our frames with interior foam inserts made of Neopar, and we use Quantic spacer bar in our IGUs. We're the first Canadian company to get a certified component window, and we were also the first to do a large-scale multifamily building here in Vancouver called the Skeena project that we did with Cornerstone Architects. So Euroline supported me in 2021 to take the course to become a certified Passive House consultant, and I supported myself in passing. And since then, we've really put our foot on the gas to reaffirm our position as the premium Canadian window company, Passive House window company, sorry. And by company, I mean not just a supplier, but a partner in all of these projects, because that is key to get these to go as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. So we have multiple single and multifamily projects on the go right now, either in production or in installation phases. And it was difficult to choose one, but I want to talk today about Chomo House because it's a very interesting concept, not just as a passive house, but as far as the residents and who's going to live there and how they're going to live there. So Chomo House, sorry, I'll just swap slides here. Chomo House is located on Main Street in Vancouver, and Main Street is just that. It's right in the heart of the city. Main goes north-south, and it's a very busy street. And since this is definitely a non-typical type of construction for Vancouver, so we're famous for our glass towers with condos in them, which is the most inefficient way to make a multifamily building. This is the opposite. So it's kind of a cool structure as well, sort of a Scandinavian feel. It's 12 units and it's co-housing. It's not a strata, it's actual co-housing. So there's a common space that's shared. There's a common courtyard area and garden, as well as charging for one car that's actually going to be a shared car, and other cars as well, and electric bicycles. So you're getting where they're going with this. They're even talking about doing shared meals on barbecue days a couple times a month, which is fantastic. So the reason I want to talk about this is because I love this idea of the holistic approach to Passive House. So it's not just a building, but it's a lifestyle. So these people have made a real commitment to the whole thing. So I feel, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, it's about how we contribute individually. So these people really deserve a hats off. These owners deserve a hats off for their commitment to this. And I mean, it's a lesson to all of us to sort of live our lives more passively, right? So why is the window guy at the construction site when they're pouring foundations or stripping foundations? Well, this speaks to the whole process with us and with me. As Sean mentioned, I come from a building background. My father was a builder. My whole family's in the construction business. And I take these projects on as though they're my kids. So this is my baby. This is a really cool project, and I wanted to be there from the beginning, but there's a lot to be gained from that, right? So I'm interested in the project as a whole and what I can contribute. Maybe I might have some pointers at this stage that could help out. I believe the window supplier in a passive house needs to understand a lot more than just the size, the color, and configurations of the windows, or even know how to put that info into the PHPP. You need to understand the relationship with the windows to the whole building as a whole and help to improve that building envelope, especially, and not hinder it. So that's where I don't have a lot of technical slides, but to speak to the technical side of this, there's on every project, and especially every passive house project, we're going to run into challenges and different types of challenges. So I'd love to give a shout out to the builder on this project, Habler Group, because this is their first passive house like this. And they did a really great job of being involved. The top brass was part of the conversations on all of the decisions that need to be made, any tweaks that need to be made. And it was about finding good solutions that would work. Also, the passive house consultant for the project was very open to discussion and very helpful. So from the time that we sent the first version of the shop drawings about how these components were going to go together to the final shop drawings, there were lots of talks and there was lots of back and forth. And we had to go from what we all know is the difference between an ideal modified window, what you see in our certificate, for example, and the actual configurations and sizes that are going to be on site. So for example, on this job, we provided all of the suite entry doors. So a suite entry door with a full glass light, so triple glazed doors with a side light. Now, because of the size limits of RAL FIPRO on length, for example, without creating an issue with maybe warpage for on a door sash, for example, we have to insert a steel connection. So it's a frame to frame connection with a piece of steel in there. So that's a no-no. And that's a no-no for thermal bridging, and it's a no-no for comfort as well. So you could end up with condensation at that spot. It's a challenge to overcome. So we Flixo modeled that, and then with the help of our internal engineering crew and maybe some ideas from me, we added some foam backer rod in front and in behind that steel connection, and then siliconed it to death. We reflixoed that, and we were well within the parameters for comfort on that connection. They're not very long. The doors are only 83 inches tall, but there are 12 of them, so that adds up. So it is a bit of a thermal bridge, but it's an acceptable one that's going to perform in real time. So that's the point of this exercise, like it should. So secondly, we have foam inserts, as I mentioned. Those are really high efficient foam. It's called Neopore Plus. It's got graphite in it, so it really insulates very well. But we have to take some of that foam out at hardware locations and put in intermittent steel. So that needs to be factored in. So Roger and I looked at that when we sent in the shops, and we reduced the amount of steel to the bare minimum everywhere we could, while still maintaining a structurally strong window that's not going to change. It's not going to warp. It's not going to do anything bad after any time of any number of years. Thirdly, as I mentioned, we're on a busy street. So Main Street is 4 lanes, sometimes up to 6 lanes of traffic, and it's constant. So we had Oitc Challenges. So with Oitc, we're going to be using thicker glass, 6 mil lamy in the center pane of the triple glazing. So that actually was a bad for a good. It forced us to use an oversized IGU, so a thicker IGU. Typically, our modeled window is 44 mils. We went all the way up to 52 mils. So we have bigger space between the glass and 3/4 inch spacer bar. So that led to a better UW, or a better center of glass number of 0.65, and an overall UW that was well within, again, the parameters of what we need to do in real time. So all of the real guts of the window were really factored into how it's going to perform in real life. Again, Flixo model, Flixo model, Flixo model. This forced us to re-look at a lot of our components and provide Flixo models for things like a barrier-free sill for the suite entries, which is a weak link, but it has to be there. And we needed that real data so that Roger could model the building correctly, and we were able to do that with them. And then install. We helped with, as I mentioned, Habler, this is their first time building a project like this. So they hadn't installed windows in a passive house before. So we helped them out. We didn't do the envelope detailing. I'm talking about the pure install. So we didn't pick, for example, the envelope materials or the weather resistant barriers and things like that. We did provide that angle for anchoring the window at the bottom, but they did all of this detailing. But the actual install, we sent our crews over there, and we did a 4-hour-long mock-up with them, showed them how the windows go in, how they get adjusted, and how to get them to work properly. And then lastly, but probably most importantly for a window company in a passive house, is to be able to give you an airtight window on top of a thermally efficient window, but an airtight window. So aside from just doing the mock-up with them, we're actually going back tomorrow. We have an appointment there at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to do adjustments with them for their blower door test. So they're getting the red door of truth soon, and we want them to get a phenomenal number so that they don't have to worry about other elements of the building. So the windows, although they may be the least insulated part of the wall assembly, they should not be the weakest link in the wall assembly. They should be a great contributor to it. As we know, in a passive house, you can't have a passive house without windows because they're your heat source as well. So we want the gist of the exercise was to be a great contributor and to look at what we're doing and be willing to tweak what we're doing and make it better with our existing systems, and make sure that the numbers we're providing are accurate and real-time numbers. So that's it. This is a very cool project. I'm very proud to have been a part of it because, like I say, I love the full commitment to passive house living on this. And thanks for having me. And I promise to be around more, as we are a sponsor here. And I look forward to our component spotlight in September. And I promise your minds will be blown.
All right, Alfred. Well, that date is pinned. Thank you for that. I know there's a couple of questions, so we'll come back to that. Moving on. Again, it's a great project, and I agree. The co-housing approach to development is really unique and really exciting. And so hopefully we'll be able to feature that project as it moves along. So thanks for giving us that little bit of info. Moving along to Kim Walton, happy to introduce her. Kim has worked as a contract building designer since 1980, taking a holistic approach to the design of small buildings. She facilitates the production of elegant, functional, healthy, durable, energy efficient, beautiful, and fun buildings that are sensitive to the site and clients' needs. Applying skills in energy modeling and employing excellence in building science, she designs and manages passive house and net zero projects across Western Canada. And Kim is also a certified FIAST designer and builder, and she is our next presenter. Kim?
So I'm going to talk about a house in Canmore, and thank you very much for that introduction. And the address in Canmore is 3 Van Horn. my name's Kim Walton, and as well as the other things that Sean mentioned in the introduction. I'm also a member of the board for Passive House Alberta, and I'm the treasurer for that. And I'm on the board for Passive Buildings Canada, for which I am the president. So just a little plug for those guys. I'm working on this project with HSS Design Build, which is Raphael, and Collective Carpentry will be supplying the walls and some of the floor system and some of the roof system for the project. There's a lot to say about this project, but I'm just going to really focus on the prefabricated components of the building. But just to say that it is in a cold climate, it's in zone 7, and that the walls will be prefabricated. We are also ordering the windows from Europe. So that means that we need to be really prepared for making sure that our rough openings and everything is exactly right for these windows that are coming. And a lot of the windows will have window shading, and we'll also be ordering flashing for these windows. So everything needs to be pre-planned for. The house will also be electric and incorporate low embodied energy and fire smart strategies and the stormwater management on the site. And it needs to be elk proof. If anybody doesn't know what an elk is, they're really big deer with antlers, and they run in herds in this area. And it'll be certifiable, and we intend to certify this project. Like I say, there's a lot to say about it, but at this point, and this map is just showing us where Canmore is in Canada. It's on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. And all that red stuff on the map in the middle is just showing how susceptible the area is to wildfire, mostly because of the trees and the forest. The site is astounding. Anywhere in Canmore is quite beautiful, but in this particular site, this is the view from through the site from the street side to the back of the site of the lot. So it's a valley view with mountains and trees, and often elk. So the plan of the house, I'm not going to talk about the plan right now as much as I am about the components, but the plan incorporates this view. So this is the house. The plan is to have built a box, make it simple for prefabrication. These are the components that'll be delivered by Collective Carpentry. If those that don't know, Collective Carpentry prefabricates walls that are in a classic Larson truss style wall with a utility wall on the inside, and then wall trusses or I-joists on the outside filled with cellulose fiber, and they arrive on site pre-insulated and are craned into place. So Collective Carpentry will supply all of the walls with these rough openings in them, the floor system for the main floor, and a drop ceiling for the ceiling of the second floor. It's just drawings from Collective Carpentry to show the parts that they'll be supplying. So we're just trying to be very simple with what they're supplying, and has a bit to do with the economy of getting this to the site, and the prefabrication and ease of putting it all together. But this is what the house will look like when we're done. So we'll be adding all of these components to the house afterwards, adding a garage to the front, and all of the lipstick, which is functional lipstick, to the rest of the house. And I've got a little video for you, just so that you can see how it all goes together. Kind of a slab on grade. Site's a little bit too slopey for complete slab on grade. We're going to put up some walls, throw in a floor system and a drop ceiling, pop a roof on top of all of that, and a deck and a garage. And there we have a kind of a Rocky Mountain house. And with the client dancing in the driveway. Best client, by the way, best client ever. So I wanted to show you this this page, part of the set of drawings. We've been working on this one literally for months. So just because we're really concerned about making sure we've got the right rough openings and the right windows and the right sizes, we've got metric dimensions in here, and we've got imperial dimensions in here, and we've got rough openings detailed in here. And we're specifying which windows have curved blinds, which windows do not. Some patio doors or have a bigger sill and some are smaller. Some of the window frames change. So all of those things are so important to detail and be sure that we have done accurately before we order them, and so that we have no surprises on site. And with all of that is a ton of details for the installation of all these doors and windows, so that we all understand where the windows and doors are in the walls, because that changes from window to window. The lintels are changing from window to window and door to door. And some of the, because some of the windows have blinds and some don't, those details all change as well. So it looks pretty simple, but there's a lot of pre-planning involved. This is just more window details that have to do with the installation of how these windows will be installed, whether they have blinds, and what the sills look like, just because they're all these components will be pre-ordered. And that is my presentation, which I think is 5 minutes.
Yeah, that was amazing. Such
I
great
have so many more things to present about this house, but that's just a teaser.
Well, it is. This is why this whole thing is about, is to get people to come back in the fall to check out the full stuff. This is fantastic, and lots of great points about that project. So now we're going to move along to Brandon. Brennan is a passive house and development consultant at NK Passive. He's an accredited architecture and real estate professional, and is actively involved in the design and development of high performance, zero energy buildings, advocating for policy advancement that leads to sustainable urban environments and more attractive neighborhoods. And I have to also say, since this is actually the 5th anniversary of the Icebox Challenge that started in Vancouver, he was a very integral part of getting the Icebox moved into the US. He did have to spend, I think, $1 US to make the transition happen.
It was $1 US, not Canadian. Yep. You are correct.
And
you had to put something on the bill of sale.
And was able to carry on. So Brandon, over to you, and thanks again for all the Icebox Challenge stuff. So yeah, over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the introduction. I will say I'm a last minute fill-in for the owner, the developer himself. I will say what I love about this owner, and Kim, I'll have to challenge you on the best owner ever. He actually shows up at Passive House Accelerator, which I think he's one of the few owners and developers who are perfectly willing to be here. So that said, Shane and I have worked together probably 4 or 5 years at this point. We're now doing a whole series of projects together. This was the first one we worked on. Unfortunately, in Montgomery County, where this is located, it can take 7 years from when you start something to when people move in. So we're 4 years in, which gives you a rough idea of where we're at, and about 3 years left to go. Make sure you're seeing my screen. I'm assuming you're seeing my screen.
Looks great.
There we go. Just making sure it advances. Is everybody seeing it okay? Good. Yeah, so Shane Pollan, truly the best partner I could ever ask for. He is a 3rd generation developer. His partner is his cousin. 2 development families intermarrying. A very interesting way to get it. There are families who have been investing in real estate since the very, I guess, the end of World War II and early 1950s. They're trying to figure out how to get it on to the next generations. And that is really key to kind of where they came from. So the Duffy companies is Jeremy Duffy, the PS Ventures is Shane Pollan. They're in partnership with the Housing Opportunity Commission of Montgomery County, which is the large quasi-governmental agency charged at providing affordable and mixed-use housing. Housing Opportunity Commission of Montgomery County is in the same boat. They did a lot of development in the 50s and 60s, getting garden-style apartments near metro stops in the DC area. That stuff is now 50 years old. needs to be replaced. The locations where their housing has located, it's just ready for that next version. So what they're often doing is taking 2 or 3 story existing low-income multifamily housing in high transit, high density areas and converting it into high performance towers going forward. They've got a large backlog that they're planning. So what I'm going through tonight is the first of what will hopefully be a series. This was also planned as like the prototype project to prove that they could do it at scale at close to cost. How Duffy got here, I think the best quote that Shane would give, that I've heard him give again and again, they hold and operate everything they own. And so they're not concerned about who they need to rent to today. They're concerned about who they have to compete to 20 years from now. And that perspective, that shift on the ownership side really drives what they do. And one of the better stories they said was very early on, just after like 2002, 2003, they needed a new family office building. Shane and his cousin decided to go early and deep into LEED. The goal was they were going to build an office building, go for like LEED Gold. They'll take 20% of it, and then they'll take it to market for 80%. They built that building, which was their headquarters. GSA came along, kicked them out, took over the building, took an entire lease, said they couldn't have it. And then eventually they had to go on and find their own headquarters later. But what they realized very early on is they committed to doing green building, ultra energy efficient building. The market perpetually was rewarding. And that feedback loop on an ownership side has really convinced them to be at the forefront and to keep pushing energy, pushing other aspects of green building, because they're always coming back for it. They're the first owner that I'll say will like put a slide like this up. This is a PS Ventures slide. I mean, in some degree, we've all seen some variant of it, but this is truly how sustainability comes to the core of what they do. And also, once again, this is Shane's slide, an owner putting forward, why are they focusing on durability, energy costs, surpassing code compliance. They will use incentives to help fund it. They are perfectly willing to go out and chase money to help cover that cost delta. But it also ties into even their family identity, their family properties, meaning people seek them out for it. And this property that they came up, the one that we're talking about today, Hilldale Gateway, it came about because they were involved in a master planning process, and their family owned everything, almost everything on one side of the neighborhood. The Housing Opportunity Commission owned low-rise existing building on the other side. And when it went out to RFP, it became very natural. Like their interests were aligned. They're not a market rate developer who's going to go out and flip it and then go try to do something else. They will stay in it for the long term. They actually do care about the developer that they're doing it. It's right across the street from a large asset that they have. So they want to make sure that good quality housing goes in. And they have taken properties that they have and are slowly taking what are parking lots and then filling them with hotels, multi-story offices, and redevelopment. This is right at the Capital Beltway, right where 95 comes in. So it's a incredibly prominent area. So the project itself is in multiple phases. It will be an all-electric, mixed-use, mixed-income development. There are, we'll call it the AR portion is the left hand, that is age-restricted with retail on the bottom. There's a 8-story precast garage wrapped in solar panels in the middle. I will say I always have to double check this. There's 1.3 gigawatts of on-site solar generation, which equates somewhere to about 4.5 to 5 acres of on-site solar. Then there's a 308 unit market rate mixed income building. I will say it also has a swimming pool in the envelope for those who really want to geek out on the tech side. That is an incredibly fun thing to model. There's a pad in the middle that's going to have some interim retail around a gathering space, but it's also planned that it can take a 7-story office building prepped as heavy timber or a heavy timber hotel, depending on which way the market goes. So that FAR is held in reserve. There's also a famous international coffee shop that wanted to switch sides of the intersection. And you can probably figure out which one that is by the drive through there. I think too, another key part is they do use Passive House as a way to hit LEED Platinum, as a way to get to deep tax incentive. So they are capitalist market rate developers just like anybody else. The good news is that their heart's in the right place and they're willing to chase after the incentives. So they're using the solar tax credit, they're using LIHTC, they're using tax abatement in order to help get this stuff done at scale. Flip back through. So that's kind of a good idea of the overall site. We do have a bit on approach. This, once again, is from them. The way that I met Shane was he researched us 6 months before he ever even introduced himself. He researched Passive House before he ever introduced himself. I was at the time spending about half my time in Seattle, half here. He went to Seattle, saw us at the FIAS conference, and then approached us. And it was because of alignment. He was trying to find people who could really help him do it at scale. And then he built a diverse team of professionals from around the country, trying to find the best that he could with electrification, mechanical, GC, everything. And then fully believes in iteration. So all team members are on all calls, everybody's working towards the same goal. And anything that we might decide, even if we've made a decision as a team, if something comes up later as more information that might alter a system, we'll collectively put forward the issues, put forward the alternatives, analyze it as a group, kick the tires as a group, and then make a collective decision as where to go. Keep it as simple as possible. Absolutely. The best sample of that is, we had VRF in it originally, didn't like the price. We ended up at 1-to-1 air source heat pump, Mitsubishi pump, to get the units, the simplest possible. You would normally never expect it to work on a large building. Well, the group realized that, what was the restriction? It was the run length. Okay, well, how do you deal with the run length? Well, let's get that condenser near the unit. Where can we put it near the unit? On a deck. Great. Can we come up with a prefab deck that has 2 condensers in it stacked on top? So one deck can service 2 units and have under 60 feet of line. And we ended up reducing the overall volume of refrigerant we needed because we were able to actually come up with a different way to get there. And really key is the value cost analysis, the fact that they do not look at first cost, they look at ultimate cost. And they analyze that, they're pro forma open, so we can actually see it. And then the team, I will say I sit the strange role of design architect, passive house consultant, and development consultant. There's not a role for that. I don't even know what hat I have. When it goes through procurement, I'm in multiple parts of the team. But I have a great partner in Torty Gallus, which is a local partner, architect of record, who I'm essentially training from the inside. And then you can see everybody else. I mean, I have to give a shout out to Redwood Energy in California. Those who don't know Sean Armstrong, I keep trying to get him on this. The argument is that he talks too much, that he probably shouldn't be on the Passive House Accelerator. But he has by far been the best assistance in terms of electrification. Just a wealth of knowledge of what's coming. And we needed that. Like, there's something, as much as in our community, we kind of know what's happening with appliances or hot water heaters or whatever. But to have somebody who that's what he's thinking about every day as part of the team, he was really able to say what was coming. And McGran, too, on the mechanical side and electrical side was really key. 2 seconds. And just going to flip through just the last couple. The decisions we made, easy enough. I could go into details on any one of those later. I mean, it's the tech side, but you can see we often went for just the simplest thing possible, but the best, most durable decision possible. And we worked through each line item and each thing that we needed to pay attention to in electrification and passive house in order to solve it. And then now the county is dive deep because this first development showed that it was possible. They're now moving towards trying to get all their buildings to pay attention to essentially reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but doing it through ultra energy efficient buildings. They're laying out an incredibly aggressive climate plan to get there. And they've been really supportive, I will say. Even on the review, I was terrified about using WFI as energy code compliance. We did a pre-review with a reviewer. We were the only one that made it through in one stop. He took a look at the 2 WFI models and we were out the back door. And it kind of blew my mind. then just some last kind of, we're getting better images as we go. I think the inclusion of pickleball, that was a funny one that the owner, we had a little bit of space and we threw it in facing the beltway. To get an idea of the solar, you could get about the feeling of how much of those roofs are covered. We're finally getting into real renderings of the inside of the space, so it's coming along. Right now we're in earthwork, so we've got the building permit and land use entitlement, which is why we're finally willing to talk about the project. It's been alluded to for years, but in Montgomery County, anybody can come along and throw a wrench in the entitlement and cause a lot of delay. In the middle of it, we ended up having to build a transit center as part of it, which was not part of the original project. But right now, demolition is underway. The existing building is gone. We've got about 4 months of earthwork. We've got Clark Builders Group, one of the largest East Coast general contractors on board. We're frantically trying to get them up to speed on Passive House because they were not who we did pre-construction on. They won it through procurement and low bid. So, we're not there yet. We've got 3 more years of battles, but the good news is we've kind of made it through to the point where, it's entitled, it's there, it's ready to go. It's got commission approval, so it's moving forward to, actual construction. And the same kind of partnership, including one more, also has started the next 3 towers behind it. That contract just got awarded. I actually had to go through the procurement process again because it's public, but the next 3 are now in line. So we've got about 875 units coming behind this, using the same philosophy. And I think about the only change we're looking at making is paying attention to the embodied carbon. So we're actually looking at doing those in heavy timber on top of everything we've done with Passive House. So that's it.
We appreciate you showing up every week, and again, all these great presentations. So hopefully the 5 presenters we had here tonight stimulated you, and you want to hear more, because we will dive into these projects and more in the fall. And let's just see if I can throw up this video without too much issues.
Any better, and if we don't take action, it's gonna get worse.
Go on, you want to go?
You know you have to build to take shelter.
Did it work? Kevin, you happy?
But why is it that the way we build today, the way we built 100 years ago, no one expects their car to arrive in pieces on the front lawn, get exposed to dust, rain, wind or snow, the odd flood or two, extreme temperature fluctuations, and get put together on their lawn? Yet that's exactly how our houses are built. And even when they're built, you pay a fortune to have them heated or cool. Not to mention, they might not be keeping you healthy. This can't be the way forward. And it doesn't have to be. With building off-site sustainable systems, BOSS, this is a different way towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. From buildings to reducing costs and timelines, building healthier homes, healthier communities, and ultimately changing the built landscape of our region. But this goal isn't going to just happen. We need to think differently. When we are thinking differently, we'll be ready to design differently, adopt a different method, even innovate together and build a better future. This isn't about changing the news cycle. And no, it won't happen today and it won't happen tomorrow. But if we keep doing what we can every day, it will add up into something better. Let's dive in together.
All right, a little teaser for other stuff that's going to happen in the fall. Let's dive into questions, and I actually forgot to put them up there, but I know the first one is, Shan, you want to help me?
Absolutely, Sean. Let me jump right in and grab a hold of the first questions, which are from
Found it.
Jeff R. in Boston. Jeff, are you still with us?
Oh, I'm right here.
Great.
So this is a question for Marc, and probably supported by Kevin, because it's about air sealing. And it's the strategy you used for the floor above the garage. you showed the walls and the slab to wall connections. I'm just curious as to how you dealt with that one part of the envelope and where the air barrier was. Was it the subfloor or was it below that, above that? How'd you deal with any plumbing or anything like that?
I'll jump on that. Marc, you still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
You want to take it or you want me to take it?
I'll try to answer it and then I'll kick it over to you if you think I said something wrong. But I think so insulation wise, we actually it was pretty much the same concept as we used at the wall, right? It was the foil faced rigid insulation 2 inches, and then we taped the seams of that and connected, basically taped connections back to the walls. And then did we blow in between the joists, or that's it? We have the 2 inches.
The joist above the garage will be blown in cellulose.
Right.
And then the air barrier is the face of the foil face polyiso, which can be used as an air barrier when taped properly. So Jeff, what we tried to do is 2 birds with 1 stone. So we tried to use the rigid insulation as our thermal break, and then foil face polyiso as the air barrier, the foil face, and then we used the Proclima tape on all the seams that then match with our air barrier system. And that was our approach, and so far it's been okay, but we haven't passed our final blow door test. But full disclosure, we will get there. We tested early, tested often, and where windows and doors just went in, and we're hoping that the next round of testing equals what the visuals look like, because the visual inspection of that project looks as clean and neat as any project I've ever done before. But the masking and our pre-blower door test wasn't jiving up to what we expected. So
it's just usually there's a lot of framing detail and inconsistencies in those locations. So, okay, cool. So you took it out of the equation.
Yeah, and the geometry is so we took the same strategy on the garage as we did in the mechanical room. So the walls are the polyiso is the air barrier. And then we transitioned to in the mechanical room was a plywood ceiling and tape the seams. And then in the garage we use plywood on the wall. Polyiso on the walls and the ceiling, and everything was taped. So it's a weird geometry of a building. So it makes air tightness a little challenging, but everything looks great. And then hopefully the next round of testing will muster up to what it looks like.
Well, I'm sure you'll prove it's great too. So thanks very much. Great answer.
I'll see you at summer camp, Jeff.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. And I'm excited you guys are going to see each other in summer camp. I wish I was going to. Our next question is from R. Annette from the Yukon.
Hi there. My question is on this New York house is coming from a structural vantage point, really. Trapping the ends of timber joists into masonry walls and then creating an air barrier on the inside of the wall. I was just curious, is there any way that tip of the joist can breathe? Can it dry out if it gets condensation or anything else like that? Fully appreciate that most of the side walls are going to be up against existing properties and maybe classed as an internal environment, but you did show one area of the side wall or a gable wall that was external. So that's a question. Then the rooftop, you've got effectively a greenhouse up there. I've not really talked about this, I think, in the past few weeks, but how can you get the air out of that greenhouse and use it to heat the rest of the house for free, basically? Be grateful if you could answer those.
Marc, I'll jump on the joist if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or you answer again.
I mean, typically we wrap the ends of the joist, prep the pockets so that I think we're typically concentrating on like not letting the moisture in versus figuring out a way for it to dry out. but I don't know, Kevin, do you have any more insight on it?
So both membrane and the Viscon that we use were vapor permeable. So any moisture that was in the joist can breathe to the inside.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
So if you can imagine that first picture where the joists were pocketed and the Viscon went around, that was the air seal. The joist was completely inside, and then they packed around it, and then we secondarily taped to it. So in theory, from a vapor profile, the vapor could go in or it could go the other way, but most likely it would go towards us because of the nature of the building.
Okay.
And then Marc, on the bulkhead,
Yeah.
The strategy is the ERV, right?
Yeah, well, the ERV is part of the strategy. You know, that those bulkheads do heat up, and they do have dedicated cooling units in the summer. And one strategy we've employed on other houses, not necessarily our passive houses, but our typical townhouse project, where, I mean, this is only a sort of 3-story open stair, but very often we're dealing with 4 or 5-story open stairs. And we've been, I mean, forever doing what we call a destratification. So basically, sucking the air from the top of the staircase or the bulkhead and dumping it down into a lower floor, specifically in the winter where, you might need some of that heating on the lower floors. So, I mean, that's definitely one strategy. We haven't employed it on this particular project.
Thanks, Marc. Kevin?
Welcome.
Thanks so much for that question and rousing discussion. We have some questions up for Ben. The first from Enrique.
Thank you. Great presentations, everybody. I just it seems in one of the slides that you presented there that you have fireplace, but
Yeah.
it looked like it's outside the condition. I mean, in a building that's not the passive house building, or what is it?
Yeah, we had to really look at that particular fireplace. It's because it's double-sided fireplace, so it was quite a challenge. We had to introduce outside air for that, and the fireplace actually can open up as well. With the damper, and damper letting in and a damper letting out as well. So when it's not being used, you don't get heat in or heat out. So yeah, it was a challenge. I don't know. to be honest, I don't know how successful we were with that. With that fireplace, because he did want a wood fireplace, and it's such a feature of the house as well. I'd love to show some images of the inside. Am I allowed to do a quick 30 seconds, Shannon? Would that be allowed?
I'm not sure at the moment.
Oh, okay.
What do you guys, do we have a sharing capability set up so he can? Yeah,
Can you see this?
please do.
Okay.
Yeah, I can
Cool.
see it.
All right. So this will be, so I think there's another question coming as well. So I wanted to answer sort of both at the same time. This is Kevany from Norway. It's on the roof and on the walls, Kebony. And we used it everywhere for the sun shading device, the roof, the walls, the end walls. And then I'll just sort of go very super quick. Sorry, I totally messed up my presentation. I spent too long. So this is the inside fireplace with the stone wall here, and it's such a central, important part of the house that we wanted to keep it. But yeah, it was. We have to suck in air from underneath the deck. Putting dampers and all that kind of stuff. But we had the same sort of issue with the dryer, the electric dryer as well, and how do we exhaust with the kitchen hood as well. I think these are common problems that perhaps a lot of passive house designers have to deal with. And yeah, I don't know how successful they all were in the end. So I don't know if that answers your question very well, but I wanted to show some candy, some visual candy.
Gorgeous, gorgeous candy. Looks delicious.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry.
Thanks, Enrique. You know, I have to ask Ben, who made the airtight fireplace? Is that a stove unit?
It is, yes, it's Stove 21. Yeah.
Yeah.
Double-sided, and I forgot to mention we used Lunos for the through wall heat recovery ventilation units, which were kind of cool, and just Mitsubishi split system for those sort of tech geeks out there for the whole house. Three different zones, but yeah, it was kind of challenges every way through this project. So yeah, it would be nice to sort of learn from others as well, because I felt like it was a brand new thing, you know, even though others have been doing it for a while.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing those and answering my questions too. Our next question is from Barbara. Welcome, Barbara.
Good. Hi, nice to see you again. Sorry I've been away for so long. I did get an answer. Floyd answered the question, why put rain screen on the roof? And the answer is to match the walls. But
right.
I didn't understand what you said about the snow load. The snow stays on the standing seam roof, or it stays on the rain screen roof? And
so
does it actually insulate?
Right, exactly. So the rain screen roof basically holds the snow. It doesn't sort of shed quickly. It does over time. It melts, and then the standing seam underneath that sheds the water. So the idea was that is an added sort of insulative layer around the top of the house. Again, I don't know how real that is. I don't know how sort of scientific that is. We haven't really sort of tested. We did a blow door test, and there were some issues with the windows, the sliding doors, and you know, it's sort of ongoing actually with all those types of things. So I don't know. What I would say is the client, they love the comfort levels of the house, and that was the whole point of sort of doing a passive house, which I forgot to mention as well. It's like comfortable, you know, fresh air, year in, year out. And this is very much a four-season location. So, yeah, I don't know if it's made a huge difference in terms of heating with extra snow on the roof, but yeah, it was a justification that I used to make sure, yeah, visually that's what we wanted as well. So sorry, that's a long answer to your question, but I appreciate it. So, thank you.
Great, good answer.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thanks, Barbara. Our next question for Ben is from Jesse Bird. Jesse, are you with us? Would you like to unmute and ask your question? It looks like Jesse may have had to fly the coop.
Yeah, I mentioned Kebony before, Kebony.
Yeah, I dropped a link in the chat for that. So
yeah, sure. All right. Cool.
Yeah, that was the name in Norway. And what about Lindsay? Lindsay, are you with us? Lindsay was interested in you talking about cross bracing.
So we do have some cross ties really, and then the loft floor itself acts as a bracing element. So it's was all structurally worked out.
So like the floor of the attic are like collar ties, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it actually pokes through the corridor as well. When you look down the corridor, you can see these metal ties come through. So yeah,
that's really clever. I think that reminds me of the first presentation too, where they brought the roof down in a very clever way. You guys are giving me great ideas, so thank you. What about Lori? Lori, you have a question for Ben. Are you with us? I see your name, but maybe you can't unmute to ask.
I got a question for Ben.
Go for
Sure.
it.
What was the insulation in your SIP panels?
In terms of the R value or the Neo, I think it was
Use
Neo. Yes, yes. Yeah,
So
that's what we
graphite infused X EPS.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Cool.
And yeah, it was like what R40, what do I say? R60 for the roof, R44 for the walls. But yeah, Neo 4.
So they were 8, 10, 8.
Yeah,
8
12, 12 on the roof, and I think 10 on the from memory, 10 on the walls.
Cool.
Yeah, so quite thick.
Yeah.
And I think, should I answer Laura's question about the builder? The builder's called Black Oak. They're local builders out of, well, the owner actually doesn't work in USA anymore, so I can't even mention them for that reason. They're not around, but he did do a passive house in Saugerties across the river, across the Hudson River. So we did select a builder that had passive house experience because the Hudson River and places like Cold Spring, the Valley, it's becoming more and more sort of passive house aware, and clients are perhaps getting in tune with what's going on up there and sort of pushing the envelope, so to speak, for that. So it's great that there are experts up in the Hudson Valley for passive house, not just in the city. So yeah, it's exciting actually.
It's so exciting. There's a robust community there. It's fantastic. And
small, but
not even just passive house, but the farming and the food is spectacular.
It's experiencing a renaissance.
It is a renaissance, yeah.
The Hudson Valley stole my friend Kramer, and he's not coming back to New York City.
Yes,
and he's awesome. He's the best.
Yeah, we work closely with Kramer, and yeah, I've worked with him on another project too. So yeah, I would always recommend him. He was great, really great at what he does, and he was just like, I just needed help, right? Like, because it is technical, and it can be a bit daunting if you haven't done anything like this before. Even if you have done energy efficient, relatively sustainable homes before, it's just like, oh, it's another level, right? So yeah, he was great.
He's the nicest.
So shout out to him.
He's the nicest mechanic engineer I've ever met. And he's also a passive house nerd. He teaches passive house. He's the best.
He does. Yeah. I think we lucked out. It was great.
You got a good team.
Yep, that's for sure.
Well, that reminds me of one of the little side projects we're having fun with, which is this poll link I just threw into the chat. So not only are we sourcing community members for presentations tonight, but we're sourcing your tips and tricks that you've been learning over the past year with us. We know your knowledge base has come up with ours with every presentation you watched. So friends don't let friends draw alone. Click that link and share some of your favorite tips and tricks with us when you get a chance. And let's see, I think we do have one more question for Ben. I'm sorry, we're off to Alfred, actually. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you fielding all those questions. I'm sure there'll be more. Alfred, we had one from Arnett that I think he already left. If I'm incorrect, please let me know, but I think he's left the room. He was curious how much movement can a pH window take in a Quake without losing its rating? Is that something you can speak to, or is that something we have to check the books on?
A bit of both. That's actually an excellent question, because since everything we do is custom, that would depend on a few things. So since we're not selling like an off-the-shelf window with an off-the-shelf rating for a rated size, for example, we would have to look at the configuration of that window. We'd have the ability to add steel, for example, which isn't ideal in passive house, but if the strength was required, we do have data on that. But the quick answer is, I mean, our products go up to PG 75. So we can make a really strong window with almost zero deflection. We can't make an architectural window, but we can make a seismic and durable window, no problem. But like I say, it would be a case by case. I would have to look at the window he was asking for, and the short answer is yes, I could make it.
Excellent. I love the short answer. Very, very confident. And I also like the fact that you treat your projects like your children. And it was one really cute baby you showed us there.
Thank you.
Do you have a training that you do with folks when you, or a team building that you exercise you do for the first window?
Yeah, so we did, as I think I mentioned, unless I forgot to, we did an on-site install of one window, like one of the actual windows that was going to be used on the project instead of a mock-up. So those are really heavy windows, and they had to have restrictors on them so they typically would be installed frame first, and then we'd drop the sash in later. But we showed them how to install the windows from the inside. They'd never done a no nail flange. The framers were installing it themselves. They'd never done a no nail flange install. They'd never screwed in that steel back dam into the sill of the window before like that. So yeah, we showed them a door and a window, and we're going back tomorrow to adjust everything for them too, which is super helpful. All of that stuff has a ton of adjustment in it. All the hinges adjust in 3 different directions. So even if something is a little bit out of level on the install, we can generally fix that.
Yeah, well, and good luck with the red door of truth. Is that tomorrow as well?
No, that's in a week after next, I believe, but they're just getting ahead of it as they should.
Perfect. Perfect.
Can I jump?
Thank you.
I have a question to jump the queue from our buddy Sean, who I guess he lost power.
Yes, he did. I'm glad you have it.
So he texted me asking how we best come up with those like sort of consistent sizes. In the photo that I showed at the side of the building, they're basically all the same size and configuration. That was really part of the design team, and that's an important thing because knowing, for example, the limitations of the product so that you can avoid having to add steel to it, or having the window short enough that if you have, say, a picture window with an operable beside it, you're able to use a mullion and not a connection, which has steel. So those things were designed in by the people that were getting right from the get-go, because they were Passive House people. So that is key. So they weren't asking for something that we couldn't do. And that also makes it more cost effective. But my thought on all of that is that if designers are reaching out to their window manufacturers and asking, what are the parameters for this? What's your maximum size of glass? What do you have to do? Where do you stop without steel, or whatever the product may be? What are their limitations, and design to those limitations to create the most efficient and cost-effective window too.
Absolutely. What's the best advice you can give someone putting their window schedule together? And when is the time you like to hear from designers? Which design phase?
I'm happy to say that I do hear a lot from designers when they are planning. And they have some, here in Vancouver, we're driven by energy efficiency codes, right? So they need to start calculating windows very early in the process, even if it's not a passive house, because we're already, with our step codes, we're 1 tier below passive house for the city of Vancouver, which is fantastic. So that's building code. That is the building code. So if you want to, and there's new little fun stuff, like if they want to put a gas stove in their house, they get penalized. They have to add more insulation to make up for their gas stove. So it's all good things. So we do get a lot of questions from designers, even on single family projects, about what we can do. And then I can give them that information, like, hey, don't, if you make that window 80 inches high instead of 84 inches high, I can use a mullion. Is that going to end, raise it up at the sill, or whatever it is you need to do? And those kind of compromises are usually not big design compromises. They just make sense, and they work well. And the window looks nicer with a mullion instead of a connection too.
Alfred, I have one question, maybe two.
Okay.
So the back dam on the sill underneath, you guys provided that, or was it plastic? Was it metal?
Yeah, for commercial projects, that's a steel back dam, actually. It's steel angle.
So it's a steel angle, and it's away from the window, or is it in contact with, well, it's not really a thermal bridge because it's not.
It's on the inside, yeah. So, but we are looking. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about when we do our component spotlight, is fiberglass.
Okay.
So there are exterior fiberglass bucks for mounting windows on exterior insulation, but there's the availability of a fiberglass angle, for example, is there. It's pretty costly, but it's a nicer detail. Absolutely. But yeah, on all multifamily projects, we provide them with the steel that they need to anchor that correctly so that they spec that window or they install it as per our spec.
Nice. And then what was the reason for the aluminum flashing around the rough opening? Was that just the comfort of the GC or?
That's just foil. That's just foil face.
So the foil face, was that because they're going to caulk seal it and they like the adhesion to caulk? Or?
Yeah. That, I think that is also, obviously they consulted their Passive House consultant, but I think that's the builders, from the builders warranty sort of perspective, because they're not used to doing Passive House, so they wanted something more bomb proof than say a Sega product. That was their decision.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent. Our next question is for Ben from, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Our next question is for Kim from Peter Molinar.
Yeah. Hello, that was a nice project. I was just wondering, as the Larson trusses, you said they're mentioned, they're prefabbed and shipped to site, how much settling occurs of the blown-in insulation during the transport and handling while being insulated? Is there a lot or is it minimal?
The panels are dense packed, so so they're at least 4 pounds per square foot. So don't expect any settling. But just saying that the second floor walls come up beyond the building envelope or the building itself, and there will be a drop ceiling that's insulated as well. There was a little bit of settling at the top that would be taken care of, but not really concerned about settling with that wall type. It's when it's installed in the factory, it's pretty consistent, and they know exactly what's going on in all of the walls. So when I've had dense pack installed on site, and the walls are vertical when it's being installed, the installer will definitely come back and top things up after a little bit, just to be sure. So on site's probably really more risky than the ones that are done in the factory.
Yeah, there's probably more consistency. Go ahead, Kevin.
The classification of dense packed cellulose is 3.5 pounds per cubic foot. I know Collective Carpentry does like 4 pounds per cubic foot, if not more, just from their presentations on the Passive House Accelerator. And then in Europe, when they do dense packed cellulose, they have this like test where they do a rack, where it's like a vibration test, and then they take the face off and then they tilt it and they see if it can self-support itself. And I would love to see that more on the North American side, but like when I was teaching the air sealing installer class for, we used to make the students take the dense packed cellulose thing they tried, put it over their head and see if it would fall down and make it snow. It was a good learning experience of like, did you do a great job at dense packed cellulose? And then if it fell down on your head, you had to redo it again. And it was kind of maybe a hazing process, but also a learning lesson of like, don't let that settling fall down on you. And it was good life experience. And that's maybe the reason I'm not a trainer anymore, but thanks guys.
I'm still pulling cellulose out of my beard, Kevin.
I want that kind of.
Did you say your ear or your beard?
I think it's a process of love, and I want that kind of hazing in my life. I want to see that kind of team building on my job sites. We are, I would say we're skipping the elephant in the room, but it's really we're skipping the elk in the room. Kim, can you talk about how you make something elk proof?
So in Canmore, it's not just elk proof, it's bear proof as well. So what you're allowed to grow in your yard is restricted. And what you do is you grow things that elk don't like to eat, and make it less elk friendly. They won't come around if there's not anything to eat. Bears are the same thing. So fruit trees are not allowed in the town of Canmore, and anything that attracts bears as well. So yeah, I know there can be, before this building goes up, it's easily 20 to 15 to 20 elk on this lot. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
The other question I had was about the functional lipstick, because when you mentioned that phrase, you were showing a lot of almost shading elements and in the roof lines.
Yeah, there's a lot of shading elements. It's on the north side, especially, we wanted to really articulate the elevations so that there is a lot of shade lines, and it's a vernacular for the community. There are architectural controls to somewhat in the town where there's some expectation to have steeper roofs. There's limitations on overhangs that has to do with fire protection. So there are some jumping off points for the town in terms of roof slope. And we did take that and exaggerated it on the north side. Then on the south side, we are using overhangs to be sure that we're getting good shading. There's a lot of windows, a lot more windows than there probably should be, but the views are amazing. And so we've used the overhangs as part of the shading strategy for protect us from overheating, as well as the shades the exterior shades, blinds that'll go in as well. So just really concerned about overheating and the planet warming up, you guys.
Yeah, that's a call to action. I hear that loud and clear.
Kim, I'd love to give you some shout outs for your colors on your details, signifying where they were. I love to see color details. It really makes it intuitive to like the installer of like what goes where and what material to use. So those details are phenomenal.
For anybody who does details and does drafting, one of the trickiest parts, and it doesn't seem like it should be tricky, is to be consistent from one detail to another, and just keeping those colors the same, keeping the legends the same, so that you're not tripping over it from one drawing to another. And as somebody who's drawing them, you don't necessarily think about what somebody who's reading the drawings will see. So that consistency is important right from the outset. So it's something that we had to go back and forth on a few times just to be sure that we had enough variation in color for all of the different levels of membranes, etc., flashing, and that they were not exactly the same, that they're differentiated enough that you could tell that there was something else going on. Awesome.
Yeah, well done. Beautiful. And they speak for themselves.
Good.
Our next question is back to Barbara and Oz, because she had one about the green roofs under the PV. Barbara, would you like to ask that one?
Hi, cheers. So back in November of last year, Ron Silitano gave a great talk about housing he's doing in Philly, Onion Flats and various other, where he had green roofs under the PV array. And having a green roof under PVs helps the PVs operate at their optimal electricity generating temperatures. I mean, maybe that's especially true here in Australia, where places like, there's a big development in Sydney, identical roofs. One was a green roof with PV, the other one was just a roof with PV. And the roof that had the greenery underneath the PVs generated like 15% more electricity because they stayed at a good temperature. And here in Australia, I'm particularly worried about the temperature increases. We're already like at 40 degrees for a week during the summer. When it starts going above that, the PVs are just not going to work properly. So I just wondered if he's considering putting PVs on his roof, or would he consider retrofitting in the future? And that was for Brandon, I think.
Yes.
Is he still there? Maybe.
I was going to say, I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Thinking about that. So for us, like, we didn't consider it just because we're going bulk. I mean, there would be so much green roof under so much solar. It just made more sense to just, I mean, the garage, like, I hate to say standard panels using an S5 clip mounted directly to a standing seam roof. So, you know, I hate to say the simplest detail possible. The vertical are the same panels mounted on a steel frame. the roof itself is just conventional, I'll call it racking like Aurora would do. So I'm sure there's plenty of justifications to do it. I think in our case, there was a reason. That makes sense.
Okay. Yep.
And
You know,
I would
Brandon,
say
I
like
got-
we're still working on meter allocation. We didn't really go through it, but we are. Our goal has been to get the AR, the age-restricted building, to be net zero in high rise. But there, our biggest fluctuation is actually occupant load. And so we've been trying to figure out how to really balance what we can produce versus what we can consume. And then if we have any surplus, how to apply that to the age restricted. So I don't think we're looking to produce more. I think we're looking to do a large volume in the most cost effective manner.
Nice. Bravo to that.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, Brandon, where there's a pickleball court, there's a way, and you know, if you're having that volume.
So I saw Shane, the development partner who's supposed to do it, joined the call, and I wasn't going to make him do it. But for 4 years, he's been saying pickleball's the wave of the future. It is. I mean, ever since he first brought it up, like I felt that if Passive House is growing exponentially, pickleball, we got to figure out what they've got. They're growing at 4 times the rate of Passive House right now. Like it's.
I think we're
I could tell you
pickleball.
Like Kevin?
We're just adding a pH to pickleball. It's pickleball.
Yeah.
So
that's just what we're doing. What do you talk about in between sets?
Yeah.
I can tell you there's a lot of basements I tore the floor out of to make the height a little bit bigger, and those tiles were shuffleboard tiles, right? I think we can imagine that era. So hey, there's trends. How we doing on cues, Miss Shannon?
We just have a few left. I mean, this is like wrapping up the summer. I'm ready to put my sunglasses back on and get back on vacation, you guys. I think there are another one from Peter and one more from Dan.
Hello, and for Brandon, that wonderful looking stone fireplace wall, does that act as a thermal mass for the house?
Is that for me? Yeah. Sort of, yes. not deliberately, but it can. It's not like it's, I want to say 3-inch thick veneer for the stone, and then it's concrete block behind. So there is a thermal mass to it, definitely. But it doesn't get a lot of solar access. The direct sunlight doesn't really hit it, but it does work, to a certain degree, but wasn't the primary reason. But behind it was more sort of visual and having a hearth, right? Something that sort of you can walk around and is essential to the house. But yeah, I think in a minimal way it works a little bit with the thermal mass. Thanks for the question.
And I would say it acts as a thermal battery, so it
Yeah,
heats up
right.
during the day, accumulates heat, and then slowly releases it. So I would say it's almost as close to a trom wall as you get.
Trom wall, yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't designed for that. It was, as I said, it wasn't accepting sunlight, but yeah, just in terms of sort of ambient air temperature, I'm sure it would act as a bit of a battery. So yeah, we'll go with that.
That's great. And I was just wondering, I like the way you sneaked in the makeup air from below. Is that
right?
The detail?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot. That was really difficult. We hadn't originally designed for a full basement. And then we started digging, and the builder was like, hey, you could do a full basement. It's supposed to be half a basement. And then it sort of messed everything up to get air into that chimney, into that fireplace, because the basement was there. So we sort of had to sort of use the deck, underneath the deck, and make sure critters don't get in there. And it was just, it wasn't a simple vent. It wasn't easy. It's hard to get to. So it was a solution, but it wasn't an easy sort of logical one. But yeah, there are some vents as well on the inside for that stove. So that was very hard to hide on a stone wall. So they ended up actually cutting CNC cutting vent holes in the stone to allow that air vent at the bottom at the top of the chimney to allow for the inside air to work as well. So yeah, it was ridiculous.
But a great aesthetic.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful stone wall. Like there was a local mason did it. He spent like a whole month cutting these things. And I don't know if you saw the photo, but it's about a quarter of an inch from the white oak ceiling, and it's just amazing the amount of effort and time that went into that wall. It's very appreciative of that kind of craftsmanship that you don't often see it these days, right? So yeah, it's a feature for sure.
The craftsmanship is shown in the design, the execution, and everything throughout that project. It might not be certified, but the people who put the design together are certifiable.
Thanks, Kevin. I like that. Can I use that one?
That's great.
Anytime.
How did we not use that in the last 2 years? That was fantastic.
Right.
And
Some of
Ben,
the craziest
we've
people
lost.
I know are my Passive House friends.
And Ben, we've lost the last person who was asking a question, but I believe it was for you about the Lunos units. He was wondering how many you used.
Oh, that's a good question. I think we used at least 6 pairs, right? So upstairs, bedrooms, the main space, the great room, and also even in the carriage house, which didn't need it, but we sort of went with it anyway. So does that add up to 6? Yeah, 2 bedrooms. Oh, and downstairs as well. So in the basement, there's a bedroom down there. So at least 6 off the top of my head. I know that's not super accurate, but yeah, 6 or 7 pairs. Yeah, what's really interesting, I thought the Lunos was going to be super quiet, but because a passive house is so airtight and there's just no noise outside, you can hear it, at night when you're sleeping. So that was something that I didn't love, with that system, because it pulses every 60 seconds, right? So you can sort of feel it in the air, especially when it's so quiet inside this house. So yeah, a learning experience using Lunos. I'll probably use them again, but just sort of manage expectations perhaps.
But Ben, your design of those barn-like structures, you don't have any through floor space to run ERV ducts, so they're an ingenious solution. So I mean,
right.
Like you don't have mechanical space to run ERV tubes everywhere that you may need.
Yeah, I didn't want ducts. I wanted to get away from all of that, and so it's a ductless mini split system as well. So just easy feed. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So the trick was to locate everything so that it's not super obvious on the outside, right? For the Lunos system, yeah, on the inside they're pretty subtle because it's like white on white, but on the outside it's like, how do you best sort of hide that grill? If there's 12 of them, right, around the house. So that was a process that went through as well. But I think we did all okay to sort of hide them just as good visually speaking.
Well, you did a great job, and 2 hours north of the city, I think anyone could find that a beautiful place to go to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
if you have to hear the outside sounds, what a better place to hear.
Right.
Let us know if they put it up for Airbnb. We'll all go there for a party or something.
Not that kind of house.
Damn it.
Darn, looks like it is. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, thanks to all the speakers tonight. Kevin, am I cutting you off? Go ahead.
I have one question for Brandon. What's your training strategy for your GCs down in that area?
Oh God, put it in the specification. I hate to say.
Are you doing
the idea,
RFQ?
like we're going to send them through builders training. We're having discussions about mock-up. Honestly, our biggest concern, we're not concerned about the quality that the GCs are able to do. Because we switched GCs between pre-construction and the one who actually won the project, that's actually a big question because we can't control the subs. So the first thing we have to do is control the training of the general contractor who wins the job. So that's going through, design training essentially. And then there's builders training when we actually get to the subs. We want to make sure that the project managers essentially understand why. The other thing that we did very early on was actually have the project team, including like myself and Lois Arena, came in to actually give the whole design team an overview coming on. But yeah, it's terrifying because with the low bid and the quality expectations, I feel the design team has got there. Like the architect partner ended up sending 2 people through CPHD through I'll call it NAPHN because I can't just immediately flip over to new languages. They change their branding. But on the GC side, yeah, it's going to be specification more than anything else. And lots of mock-ups. We actually that was an argument on a call recently. 2 of the mock-ups were the size of small retail buildings. So I think we're planning a little bit too big. We kind of got to scale it back. But the idea is that everything's going to be done on site and tested in advance before taking to scale.
I love it. I love it.
We can't mess up 2,200 windows. Like we've got to get it right.
My suggestion that I've been selling on my projects that I've worked on has always been the GC needs an office or the security guard or storage or something like that. So make whatever you're going to build airtight and insulated and have that be the office, the Passive House office. It's beautiful to take a phone call, to have a meeting, and like as you're leaving the meeting, you have to walk past the details that are outside. And,
I think that's a great suggestion because we actually have the land on site to pull that off.
But
I could see a mobile office, Kevin. I think your calling is showing maybe a mobile office
only
that
Cushman Wakefield.
You can send to the site like an icebox challenge.
Yeah. Compared to most sites, that's the one issue we have is we're actually not site constrained because it's such a large site to begin with. Even though it's high density, we still have space in the ground plane. So,
Brennan, I've got a screw gun. I'll start making it. Just send over the design. I'll finish the building about the same time the design's over.
Fair enough. No, I think if you look at it back to training's the first, which gets you there, but there's an expectation of on-site demonstration in advance of carrying it to scale. That everything has got to be run through, tested. Let's go make sure we've got the tape and the flashing, that the drawing is understood to the installer. And the good news is we still have a bit of time on that. But
so Brandon, I've worked with Stephen Winters as the Passive House consultant, or?
No, so very early on, we brought in Lois and I think partly was just for, call it third-party critique. Lois and I have taught together, but like when we did the initial Passive House presentation to everybody, Lois was there that same day. Sean Armstrong was there. I mean, it's back to no egos on the team. I mean, there are people throughout. So yeah, I was the Passive House consultant, but then she actually was looking over my shoulder. Sean Armstrong was the electrification consultant. Lois and I are both looking over Sean Armstrong's shoulder. And on top of it, then we've got Shane, who's on top of it from a developer perspective. He's got better technical knowledge than just about any other developer out there. He's taught himself. He's gone and done like a Stubrick's course. He's even asked me whether he should take the designer course. It's probably the only person I ever told not to. And it's just because of all the things that he needs to spend his time on. I'd much rather have him make sure these projects happen than, really be in the weeds. And he's got a better working knowledge than just about any developer out there at this point. So
that is high praise.
Stephen Winters and tell them we used a few of the training strategies for 2 high rises in New York City, and we did mock-ups, on-site training, and I was a part of that training team as long as with Mike O'Donnell and the rest of them, and it went pretty far because we did mock-ups and on-site training, and it was real to the project. The GC wasn't like distracted by anything. It was like, this is your project. This is what you need to know. And then the supers and the assistant supers all were on board. And then they had teaching tools afterwards to go back to and teach. Hindsight on a New York City site was within like 3 weeks, they knocked that thing down and it was gone. Whereas if you can keep it there for a lot longer during construction, it can tell a story a lot longer.
So, yeah, and I think the idea too, we will be leaving whatever's mocked up there probably throughout the duration of construction, or at least until it's in the way. But I jokingly or flippantly said specification in a bid situation. Unfortunately, all we can control is we can't control their passion, right? We can't actually say that you're going to care about this. We can ask for them to have somebody who owns air sealing, but that's not the same way as getting somebody in a sub who owns it. And so it's kind of on us as a team. Yes, we can put it in the specification to make sure they get the training. There's still going to be, I'll call it almost the onboarding and the psyching up of the subs to care about it, because that's not going to be naturally there in a low bid environment.
Yeah. It's an uphill battle, but those that teach the most gain the most trust. And when you're relating it back to the work they actually have to do, it actually gets done. And I've seen it from Cornell Tech to 86th Street to 29th Street.
Yep.
It creates this kind of like feedback mechanism from the sub to the GC of like, hey, there might be a better way. And once the workers that are doing the work feel like they have input on what's actually being built, they get buy-in, and then they start like correcting everyone. It's pretty amazing. What Passive House does is because it sets that pinnacle in the sky of like what perfection, as close to perfection is. And when you see people straying from like what's touching your work and their work, they'll correct themselves of like, hey, this is the path we're going. Keep us there. Don't be drilling holes in my air tightness work. I tried to do it as best I can. So.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting case because I've worked both with general contractors who have been passionate. Like I've done a lot of work with Cascade Build. We've done half a dozen in Seattle together. There you have the owner just absolutely on board of their GC and forming his own mechanical company because he can't find the right subs to do it. But I've had that all the way through like a union subcontractor or a union contractor in Pittsburgh who won a low bid for like the library gym. And, we got there in the end no matter what. The bigger challenge is, I think, with the ownership of the GC all on board, you don't need the cheerleader on the contractor side because it's coming from the ownership of the GC. When you move to a large general contractor who's winning a bid, their general take is just put it in the drawings and I'll build what you tell me, right? Like it's not the same passion. So, I mean, I'll actually take that as something I'll take away from tonight is how do we actually get past the like putting a requirement on somebody to put in inspiration on them? I think that's going to be the challenge. And it might be another month or another year until we even know who's putting in the windows, for example. Like all we see right now is a bid number, right? Because it's behind the veil of the GC. We don't even know who we're going to have to work with to get on board yet.
No, you only get a month. You don't get a year, Brandon. Sorry.
We're going to get a year. I think we got foundations, we got underground utilities, we've got superstructure.
Well, then there's time to teach the passion, right? The transactional is a beautiful thing and it's a time saver, but there's no replacement for the passion.
Yeah.
Shannon, I see Jeff has his hand up. Both
he does, and I think
literally.
I think Jeff, you've been super patient, and you're going to get the last question of the season. Over to you.
Wow. Well, it's not this. It's not the. Well, it's this season, not next season. But anyways, so Brandon, has there been any discussion about using the AIA IPD contract structures that like share risk instead of the typical fixed scope subcontract stuff?
No. Well, first off, this has to go through procurement through a quasi-governmental entity. So no. The other thing is what I've seen from those that have done that, I've only seen failure on that side. And on the development side, meaning, so like, let me take off that project hat and go over to my own projects. I use a loan program that's HUD guaranteed, that's funded through Berkadia, typically. That's the same group that did the Kansas City project. they use that type of project, and that was like, that's put in as an insurance failure in that loan program as like what not to do. And as much as I like the idea, in practice, like when it's come through, my bank won't even finance it. And I think a lot of them, because they've seen failures, they've seen it actually fall apart. So, back to it's a good idea. I think architects love the idea of it, and owners somewhat as well, but or GCs. But from what I've seen, it's almost insurmountable to get it in because of the first implementations. And I'll tell you, like the Kansas City project, from what I understood, Berkadia was both debt and equity. So they had a lot in. That project was going to get through one way or the other. When the GC and the tires came off, it cost them years, and now it's an example in that lending market of what not to do.
So how much was that? I'd be curious to understand, more details there, because I've talked to a bunch of contractors, and the contractors who have used that IPD sort of, I call it, I don't, IPD is just like the IA name of it, but it's really a shared risk, target kind of target driven, performance driven contract. They all love it because they've always won when they've done it, and they're willing to do it, but the developers seem to be the ones, and maybe it's the banks sitting behind developers that are nervous about it. But the structure's been used so many times with so many successes. I mean, you talked Denver Airport. I mean, there's a bunch of different big projects that have been so positively impacted by those structures. I'm wondering what the details are.
So you bring up Denver Airport, and it says whole asterisks about their baggage system, and who actually takes the liability for that. I mean, as somebody who grew up in Colorado, that was in the news for 5 years trying to unwind that project because there were some failures within the automation of the baggage.
Right.
And
so
with lots of pointing.
So which terminal was it? Because in the Denver Airport project, one terminal was done using IPD, the other was using fix. And the IPD,
I have no idea.
IPD terminal was the one that didn't have any of the problems.
Yeah. And I guess
everybody was working together to fix them.
Yeah. I'll go back to, I think the way that this particular group works, I think they're trying to kind of replicate it in who they get to the table when. And so it's not necessarily changing the contract, but what I'll say to Shane's credit was getting everybody at the table very early, meaning whether it's Passive House, whether it's the lead consultant, whether it's the verifier, whether it's the general contractor, everybody's at the table for the kickoff meeting. And my mind is that goes a long way to getting to that whole kind of, I'll call it integrated development. It's not the same thing as the contract, but you have everybody who's going to have participatory or knowledge or vested interest in, from the get-go. And then if you pair that with a group where you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to make a professional recommendation and then rethink it because more information comes. The best example I'll give is we went through all the options for ERVs, and we decided floor by floor was the best way to do it. Then we started pairing in resiliency, and we started looking at what we had in terms of power supply, unit size, panel size, everything. And then also it's like, oh my God, like maybe we're better changing this to 440, 480, upping our ERV size, but then we no longer have enough floor plate to stick to the floor by floor. Then so it's like, well, wait, if we do 2 floors, we can still skip the damper. If we do 3 floors, then we hit the damper expense. Great. So as much as the team had made a very early decision that we stuck with for 2 years, when another goal or another efficiency came up, it wasn't like anybody who had made that original decision stuck to it. We all collectively were jumping on well, what if we do this? Or what if we make this modification? What if we make this tweak? And in the end, I think the whole project was better for it. And it comes back to the more important thing besides the contract is really just having everybody in the room understanding the goals and then trying to work towards the goals in the end. And I'll go once again.
So I agree.
The team, I've watched both HOC and PS Ventures and Duffy literally start a VE meeting with a general contractor, be like, don't bring up Passive House, like bring up anything else.
Oh no.
That is a project goal. So don't strip the ERV, don't strip the EFIS, don't strip the triple glaze, like those are in. You can modify any one of those systems. You can change any one of those systems, but you can't deviate from the project goal. And that I think has just been refreshing, unbelievable to work with. And then you kick that over to the GC and everybody else. It's not saying that you can't bring up alternatives, but it's saying that you can't value engineer it to the point that you've lost the initial purpose or the initial point or the initial goal of the project.
Value engineer Passive House right down the code, right?
So wait a second. That's not value engineering.
Right.
Okay, so let's not.
I know, Jeff. I know. I made a short summary because of the time. I'm gonna concur with you, but I'm watching the clock, brother. So I think Marc and Ben and Kim and Alfred and Brandon, if we could have looked at our calendars to find a great way to wrap up the season, this would be the way. Rock stars. It was funky. It was out of sight, and we can't wait to hear more of it. And we're going to hear more of it in September and beyond. Kim's email is out there. Load up her with messages in August. Shannon's always around. Sean's always around. Kevin's always around. We're going to be there. And I'm going to skip this game tonight because of the hour. But the final words are going to Kevin or Shannon. And thank you, everyone, for being there. Can't wait for September.
Thanks for having us. Thank you very much. That was a great time.
I just want to say you're the best friends a girl could have, and I appreciate how much knowledge you brought to the table tonight. Great projects, amazing insight.
Great
friends, really fun friends.
Fun friends and great projects from around the North America. It really proves the fact that, you know, like Passive House Accelerator is making the reach of all across the world and North America and around. And I think we're making an impact and trying to spread the knowledge that we really need to really speed up this process of making buildings super energy efficient and chasing that path of, you know, energy efficiency and low carbon output that's there.